Hello! If you're new here, my name is Shelly, and if you like talking about things such as true crime, conspiracy theories, and serial killers, and you also like to talk about makeup, then you've found the place for you. Welcome home, darling. Today is day, I believe, 11 of my 13-day countdown to Halloween. I do it every year, so that means we only have 2 more videos after this. And first off, I just want to apologize for the audio. I hope that the audio is fine because I have to use the microphone that's on my camera rather than an external mic because my external mic is having issues and I can't figure it out, but I have to get this video done. So, I apologize for that. Usually I would just do my makeup and then do a voiceover, but today is another serial killer, true crime episode, case, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, today we're going to go all the way to the deserts of New Mexico and talk about the toy box killer. So if you're interested in learning about that case, then keep on watching. However, I'm going to put a very, very heavy disclaimer on this video. It's a lot of sexual assault, it's a lot of rape and abuse, and there's just a lot of really, really heavy stuff. No children are allowed to watch this. This is 18 and older. Yeah, just watch at your own risk. It's a very, very tough case. And you know, as usual, we will be talking about death and that kind of thing, description of crime scenes that we do in pretty much every video in this series, but I just wanted to throw out a very heavy disclaimer that this one is intense. I personally don't like going into too much details on a professional level, but you know, humor is also my coping mechanism and my defense mechanism, so I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyways, if you haven't entered my Halloween giveaway over on Instagram, I highly suggest you go ahead and do that. It's completely free to enter. All you have to do is be following me on Instagram, be subscribed to me here on YouTube, and then DM me a screenshot that you're subscribed, and then that is your first entry. And then after that, you can have several extra entries by sharing any of my Halloween makeup looks to your Instagram story. And I think that is all that I have to say. I hate long intros, so let's just jump into this. So the dude we're going to be talking about, his name is David Parker Ray. And David Parker Ray was born November 6th in 1939, and he grew up in New Mexico. He lived with his sister Peggy, and he lived with his mother and father until he was 10 years old. Then his mother and father got divorced. Before they got divorced, his father was a very abusive drunk, and he was very controlling, and he was just all around not a good guy whatsoever. And he would abuse the mother, he would abuse David, and he would abuse the sister Peggy. He was just awful to them all the time. Now, when he was 10 years old, his parents got divorced. Because his dad is terrible. And they went to live with his grandfather. And David's grandfather was not really any better than his dad was. So it's David, his sister Peggy, and his mom all living with his grandfather at this point. And his grandfather had super strict rules, and he was very abusive, and if you did not follow his rules, then there were like very harsh consequences. And so the situation wasn't really that much better at all for them, and his mother was just not great either. She was a drug addict, she was a drunk, and she was also like, she just didn't really act like she ever cared about her kids. And after they moved away and went to live with their grandfather, the mother just completely disappeared. She was never really around, and then she just like full on wasn't ever heard from after they moved in with their grandfather. It's just him and his sister, and it's really sad. They have to like deal with all of this. These little kids, they're just abused constantly, and then their mom disappears, and you know, it is rough. So their father, he would visit them, not like a lot, but he visited his kids every once in a while, and every time he would visit, he would bring a special gift for David. And this special gift was a very graphic, pornographic magazine. It included like the more intense things. David had a very extensive collection of these magazines because every time his dad visited, he would give him some. It wasn't like he had any escape from the abuse, because whenever he went to school, he would be super bullied because, I mean, he was more of a shy and reserved kid, and so the other kids would pick on him, and he was bullied from the time he was young all the way until the time he was like a senior. Just all throughout school, he was terribly bullied. He had been beaten like really bad a few times. It was bad. Any bullying is bad, but he got it like bad. And so I feel like whenever his father would bring him these magazines, that was like his only escape or something, maybe, because he was abused at home. Whenever he'd go to school, he was abused at school. He was just constantly being tortured, basically. In school, he also started abusing drugs, and he started drinking alcohol. He just was not having a good life at all. He was having a rough time. And apparently he also had a very wide collection of drawings and sketchings that he made, and it was very obvious that his inspiration for his drawings were from the pornographic BDSM magazines, because that is what he liked to draw. At one point he joined the army, and when he was in the army he worked as a mechanic, but he was honorably discharged, and whenever he left the army he started working as a mechanic just like in town, and everyone that used him as a mechanic, they all completely trusted him. They all said he knew exactly what he was doing. He was really good at his job. He even taught other people how to work on cars and do mechanic things. But he would like build his own little tools, his own like machinery things. He would weld together his own tools and such. Everyone described him as being super friendly, and he was always like helping people and willing to help people with whatever they needed mechanical wise. He did get married 4 different times, and he divorced each time. One of his wives he even confided in and told her that as a teenager he kidnapped a woman and tied her to a tree and tortured her, and then eventually he murdered her. And his wife didn't think much of it. She just thought that David's just being a little silly. She didn't like go to the police or anything about it. She just thought that he was just saying things to her. See, okay, that's like pretty intense thing to say, you know? So after he had confided in her about this, she said that it seemed like he had a mental illness and that his bad behavior kept getting worse and worse, and then eventually that led to them getting divorced. I don't know what type of bad behavior, I don't know what exactly went on, but it was bad enough for her to want to divorce him. He did end up having 2 daughters between the 4 marriages, and one daughter, there's like nothing about her, even find her name. I'm sure that you could find her name, but she kind of seems like she doesn't want to be associated with any of this, which I completely understand, so we're not really going to talk about her. But the other daughter, her name was Glenda Jean Ray, and they all called her Jessie. And we'll talk more about her in a little bit, but I just wanted to let you know that he did have 2 daughters. He lived in a town in New Mexico called Elephant Butte, and I'm assuming it's pronounced Elephant Butte, B-U-T-T-E. I don't think that they would name a town Elephant Butt, but you never know what people are going to do these days. So I'm assuming that it's Butte, and I'm going to pronounce it like Butte, but I'm not 100% sure. but the town Elephant Butte was right next to a town that was called Truth or Consequences. It almost seems like, you know, in high school whenever you have to like separate into teams and then everyone picks their own team name, and then there's like a team that takes it super seriously and they're like, we're Truth of Consequences, and then there's another team that thinks everything is a complete joke and is like elephant butt. Like that's what it seems like to me. You just had two different groups of people, and yeah, one of them took things too seriously and the other one didn't take it serious enough, so we end up with crazy town names. Between the two towns there was like this really big reservoir, which is like a man-made lake. And this man-made lake was super deep and huge, and it was fully stocked with different types of fish. So people from the two different towns would come and they would like get all their boats out and they would go fishing and they would spend like a lake day there all the time. And this reservoir was really popular, and like everyone knew about it and everyone hung out there. A lot of people retired to this town because this town was like warm, and I mean there's just like this big lake which is in the middle of desert area. I mean, this is New Mexico, so it was kind of like a little haven to some people, and it was just like a really popular place. It was a very busy place. Along with lots of retired people, there were also lots of sex workers, lots of drug dealers and drug addicts, and there were lots of homeless people. In like the late 1990s, this was the city with the second highest crime rate. And I mean, just all the time there were murders, people dying, assaults, rapes, anything that you can think of was happening here all the time. It seems like a good place to go and live, but then it's really one of the most violent cities. The cops in this area just kind of let a lot of things slide, or they let a lot of cases go, because when someone was murdered it was usually a sex worker or a drug addict. And we all have seen TV shows, we've all seen like documentaries, we've all seen crime shows and videos where whenever it's a sex worker or a drug addict or someone like that, the police do not care. Even like homeless people, police just don't really care or put a lot of effort and energy into solving the case. And it's really frustrating because they're still people, but I don't know. So David worked at the Elephant Butte State Park, and this is the largest state park in New Mexico, and he worked as a mechanic there. And one day he sees a smoking hot lady doing some community service, and they hit it off really well. And this woman's name was Cindy, and they become boyfriend and girlfriend. They ended up living together in a mobile home, and they're living, you know, in the middle of this area that's a lot of desert, besides the lake of course, but it's mostly desert, so there's just a lot of like plain land. So where they're living, there's a lot of land where no one lives, and so they're living together in this mobile home. And David had a lot of money saved up, so he decides to splurge a little bit, and with his splurge, you'd think living out there he'd buy like, you know, a horse, start a farm maybe with all that land out there, you know, maybe he would buy a new car. No, he bought himself $100,000 soundproof trailer that he put in his backyard, and he fully stocked this trailer. And by fully stocked I mean he put a lot of different toys and tools in this trailer. A lot of the stuff was from like a doctor's office, like surgical tools, needles, the little scissors, saws. It literally looked like he raided a doctor's office almost, but it also looked like he raided a sex store because there were like BDSM, like whips, gags. If you're my mom watching this, I don't know what any of this means. Chains strapped a fur-lined coffin. There were ropes, different types of clamps. It was literally like 50 Shades of Grey, sex dungeon, but like demonic. He also had signs that said like Satan's Den and that kind of thing. And he made like a wallpaper out of BDSM magazines. So there was just like super graphic pictures all over the walls. There were also some devices in there that he had made himself. So he would sit there and he would put stuff together. He was a very crafty little man. The ceiling, in case you were wondering, had a big mirror on it, and he also had his own homemade electrical generator, so you know he could keep using his trailer even in a power outage. So he's got this nice fancy soundproof trailer full of nightmare fuel basically. July 24th of 1996, a woman named Kelly who lived in Elephant Butte got in an argument with her husband, and in order to, you know, blow off a little steam from the fight with her husband, she goes out with her girlfriends. So her and her girlfriends are out, they're getting lit and partying, and the local bar they went to was called the Blue Water Saloon. It was a pretty popular area for a lot of people to go and spend time. Like if people in these towns wanted a night out, this is basically where everyone would go. So it was a pretty poppin' place. Kelly and her girlfriends are there playing some pool, blowing off some steam, and then it was the time of night for everyone to kind of start leaving. Some of Kelly's girlfriends left and it was just like getting late. While Kelly was there, she ran into an old friend who she hadn't seen in a really long time, and her old friend was named Jessie. Remember, told you about David's daughter whose name was Jessie? Kelly is like, I need to go home too. I'm not feeling so great. She only had one beer that night, but she just wasn't feeling good at all, so she was like, I need to go home, but she needed a ride in order to get home. So the only one left to give her a ride was Jessie, so of course she had to ask Jessie to give her a ride home. So of course Jessie was like, sure, I'll take you home. Kelly, after she got in the car with Jessie, she didn't remember anything that happened after that. And later on, they found out that Jessie had drugged her one beer that she drank and then took her to her father's trailer. And Jessie claimed that she didn't know what went on in the trailer. She just assumed that it was just some casual rape, whatever. But she didn't know like the extent of what would happen, or so she says. But basically, she drugged Kelly and then dropped her off at the trailer. So Kelly was drugged for 2 days straight, and throughout the 2 days she was like in and out of consciousness. She didn't know where she was, and like I said, after all of this she didn't remember anything at all. So she was like heavily out of it. So after 2 days, David just assumes that she's dead, and he takes her and drops her off along the side of the road. Another man saw her on the side of the road and he picked her up and he took her home. Her husband was like, oh my god, where have you been? What's going on? Why are you naked? And she basically told him, I have absolutely no idea what's been going on in the past 2 days. And her husband just completely did not believe her whatsoever. He was like, how could you not know where you've been for like the last 2 days? And he was like, you must be cheating on me. He didn't believe that she didn't know what happened at all. And he also accused her of going on a drug binge. He just did not believe her. And it really sucks because once you kind of have an idea of everything that she went through, her husband really does not seem like a great guy. But not long after all of this goes down, they actually get a divorce, and then she ends up moving off to Colorado. She didn't remember at all what happened for those 2 days, and she wouldn't find out for a long time. But we will come back to her. There was another woman named Angelica who had been attacked and assaulted, and she had escaped from David. And when she escaped from him, she went to police and tried to tell them what had happened. But police didn't believe her because she was a sex worker, and they just didn't really care for her story. They didn't find her story credible. They just did not believe her. They didn't give her the time of day. And we'll also come back to her. I am just talking about these two specific women because later on they're actually able to come forward and tell the police about this. So I'm just going in order of when their cases happen. So I guess because Angelica had escaped and gotten away, then David decided to go into town and he posed as an undercover cop. And he approached a sex worker in a parking lot whose name was Cynthia. And whenever he went up to her, Cynthia offers him, I don't know what she offered him, but she was like, you give me money, I'll do this. And he was posing as an undercover cop, so he was just like, you're under arrest for solicitation of sex work. And he handcuffed her and put her in his car. But he doesn't drive her to a police station or anything. No. He drives her to his house. He ends up chaining her to his bed. So I guess he didn't take her into the trailer. He actually took her into the house and then chained her to a bed that they had in the living room. And he puts a choke, like the choke collar for dogs, he puts one of those on her, and she ends up being in this situation for 3 days. I'm going super heavy with the bronze on purpose. Don't come for me. So at this point in time, David is still a mechanic. He has to go to work. Cindy, remember his girlfriend, is in charge of watching over Cynthia and making sure she doesn't go anywhere. She doesn't do a very good job. And I mean, thank God she didn't do a very good job. So, like the popular gal that Cindy is, she gets a phone call. So she answers this phone call while she's supposed to be watching over Cynthia, and she just kind of walks off into another room. So Cynthia sees the keys to her handcuffs or to her chains, whatever's holding her there. She sees the keys and she goes for the keys. I mean, in this moment, she's not very quiet about it. Super hard for her to be quiet about it, you know? From the other room, Cindy can hear her moving around and scooting around, you know? So then Cindy is like, hold on, let me call you back. So she puts down the phone and she goes to check on Cynthia. And whenever she gets in there, Cynthia is like sitting there unlocking her chain. So then Cindy just kind of flies across the room and jumps on top of Cynthia, trying to keep her from unlocking herself and getting free. But Cynthia had already gotten her hands free. So then Cindy grabs the lamp that was nearby and she tries to knock Cynthia out with it, but it doesn't work. Because, I mean, Cynthia has got all of this adrenaline. She's got all of this pumping through her body. She's trying to get out of here. Cynthia starts to look around. You know, she's got Cindy on top of her, trying to hit her with a lamp. She's looking around, trying to find something to hit her with. She finds an ice pick that was just sitting by the bed for some reason. So she grabs the ice pick and stabs it right into Cindy. Then Cynthia is able to get up and book it out of the door. She runs down the street, and at this point she doesn't know if Cindy died or not. She's just trying to get away. She runs down the street, and like as she's running down the street, She's screaming. She's needing someone to help her. And people see her, but they don't stop and help or anything. They don't stop and ask her what happened. They don't ask her what's wrong. They don't want to get involved. It's like the one time that people should get involved and they don't want to. It's frustrating. So then Cynthia starts banging on people's doors, and then finally a woman answered her door, and Cynthia's right there. She's completely naked and she's got the dog collar still on. I mean, yeah, she's gonna look, maybe she's on drugs or something, because that's just very common in that area. I'm just trying to speculate what people like would be thinking. Like maybe they were thinking she was tweaking, on drugs or something. I don't know. Finally, this lady answered the door, and then they sit there and they call the police together, and Cynthia's able to just sit with that woman and wait for the police. So the police get there and Cynthia starts telling them everything that's going on, and then the police are like, that's insane, there's no way. They did not believe her. They were like, this woman's on drugs, let's just take her to the hospital, get her some help, and then we'll be on our way. So they take Cynthia straight to the hospital, and then they're sitting there with her, and then they're kind of questioning her more, trying to figure out what all actually happened. And then as Cynthia is talking to them about all of the crazy stuff that she just went through, guess who walks through the door? Cindy, David's girlfriend, walks in with an ice pick through her neck. Cynthia starts flipping out and she's like, oh my god, that's her. So then the police are seeing this woman with an ice pick in her head, and they're like, okay, maybe this lady is telling us the truth and maybe we should go and check this out. So they go and they question Cindy, and Cindy's like, oh, I just, you know, nothing happened. This happens all the time. I just walked into it. Silly me. None of that happened. She's crazy. Don't listen to her. It's fine. So then the police are like, that's sus. So then the police go and find where Cindy lives, and they go into her house to check it out. And they just want to make sure that this story is just a story, and they want to just kind of check things out for themselves. They open the door and the whole place is a complete mess. They're looking around and they see the chains where it looked like someone was tied up to the bed. They also see a bucket of waste by the bed. So after seeing what looked like a tornado had gone through the living room, the police were finally like, okay, this is probably true. So then they take Cindy in, and then they take David in, and they question the both of them. They take them into custody and they're questioning them, and while they're questioning them, there are other police out there searching their trailer. This is when they find the trailer. I mean, obviously, but it's very, very gross. So they go in, they see all of the signs I was telling you about, like Satan's Den, lure of Satanism, and they also see the wallpaper, they see all of the tools of torture, they see all of the handmade tools, they see all of the handmade sex toys. There were also devices of torture. I'm not going to describe any of them, but you can imagine. They also found a tripod with a camcorder on it that was pointed towards a gynecologist chair, because I mean, this guy had like all of the chairs, he had ankle spreaders, but like torturous ones. So it's like any sex toy that you can think of or anything that is used in that way, he would like modify it and make it into like a torture device. Ankle spreaders and stuff would make hips pop out of place. It was just like everything was to the extreme, and it was horrible. The police see this camcorder pointed at the chair. They also find a clipboard, and this clipboard was like a log of all of the girls he had kidnapped. So it had like abduct date, and then it had the date written on, and then next to that it had like tally marks, and they're assuming that it's the amount of days that he had them. Maybe he had notes written of what all he did to them, but he didn't have like what their names were or anything. So the police still didn't know like what all girls this had happened to. He also had a bulletin board with their pictures, and he had Polaroids of the women, and it was like all of the women tied up in different ways, and it was basically like he would drug them and tie them up and do things, and then he would take a picture, and it's just really, really sick. On the bulletin board, he had like a long note that he had written, and it was like really disturbing. It was like a reminder to him, and this is what it said. A woman will do or say anything to get loose. They will kick, they will scratch, offer money, bite, yell, beg, scream, run, offer sex, threaten, lie, wait for an opportunity. And then he had like a whole list. Next to that, he had standard excuses, sob stories, menstruating, pregnant, and just it went on and on, just a whole list of excuses that women had given him apparently. And then at the end of the note it said, but don't let her get to you. If she's worth taking, then she's worth keeping. And then it says something like she has to be hypnotized before she can safely be released. And then at the end it said, never trust a chained captive. So this guy just had some serious issues. So like I said, there was the camcorder. So then police take the camcorder and then they kind of want to see what's recorded on it, or if there had been anything recorded on it, because maybe it would help them find some of the victims. So whenever they started watching the video, it showed a girl sitting in the gynecologist chair, and then David was standing next to her, and she was tied up and naked, and he started playing a tape recording, and he called it the hypnosis track, and it was the introductory tape for the women. And the tape was talking about how it wasn't just for him, it was for the congregation of the Church of Satan. And he was basically trying to hypnotize and brainwash the girls, and he was like, this is what I'm gonna do to you, this is what's gonna happen, blah blah blah. And it was very, very clear that the woman was drugged and she could not give consent or anything. So then the police try to find out who the girl is on tape recording. They see that she has a big tattoo on her calf. So they send the footage to the FBI and ask the FBI if they can identify the girl or find the girl. So the FBI get the footage and they're able to make out what the tattoo on the girl's calf is. And they end up posting the picture of the tattoo. I don't know if they like put it in newspapers or whatever. I don't know exactly what they did, but they were basically just like, hey, if you or anyone you know have this tattoo, we would like to talk to you. So guess whose tattoo it was? Remember Kelly, the first girl that we talked about, that David thought was dead, and so he dumped her on the side of the road and then she got divorced and all that? Yeah, her. She saw it in Colorado and she contacted them and she was like, that's my tattoo, what is going on? Because she still had no idea what happened for those past 2 days. She basically went to the police and she told them, well, I guess there was this one time where I went out with my girlfriends and then I got really sick and then I don't remember what happened. Sorry, I'm sharpening. And then I don't remember what happened for 2 days after that. So then the police show her the tapes and they show her herself sitting there in the gynecologist chair with David standing there, and he's playing her his introductory tape that we just talked about. And then all of a sudden she remembers all of it, and she had been having a lot of nightmares, and in her nightmares she was tied down and raped, and then she would wake up and just feel awful and be terrified. So she remembered everything, and I want to know what her ex-husband's reaction was when he found out that she wasn't lying and she actually went through something terrible and he was a jerk for not believing her and for just divorcing her. I mean, I don't know what else was going on in their relationship, but I'd feel pretty bad if I were him. And the audio recording that David had is on YouTube. It's about like 40 minutes long and you can listen to it. It's really creepy. I don't recommend anyone listen to it, but it is there in case you're curious. I don't like it. It creeps me out too much. So then the police gave the story to the media, and then the media posted the story out, and they were like, hey, if you have any memory from this, or if you've escaped this guy, come forward, we want to talk to you, that kind of thing. And then this is when Angelica comes forward and she's like, hey, remember me? If you had listened to me, maybe you could have arrested them and then Cynthia wouldn't have been taken. It's just so frustrating. I just wish that police would look into and believe sex workers and people more than they do. It's just really annoying. I feel like that happens all the time where they just don't believe sex workers, and then another girl gets taken and then another girl gets taken, and it's just like really? You're supposed to protect and serve everyone. Then the police were trying to find out as much as they could about Cindy and David, and they started questioning Cindy, and they also questioned Cindy's friends because they wanted to get a feel for what kind of person she was. And her friends said that she loved reading romance novels, she loved her small dog, and she listened to Christian radio. I feel like her friends were just like saying that, but I'm not completely sure. So Cindy told police that she would tell them absolutely everything they wanted to know. And she wanted to make a deal for telling them everything. She wanted a lesser sentence. And she ended up telling police that a little while ago, the FBI showed up at their house asking for David. And they said that they were investigating for a slavery ring. And they suspected him of selling women to, like, in the sex trade and stuff. And she also told police that he would always take pictures of all of his victims, but then he would burn them shortly after. So the police were upset because that could have helped them figure out who these women were, because she had told them that he had at least 30 women that she knew of that he had killed or tortured. She also said that he always talked about the women like he owned them, and he called them his packages, and he was always tinkering with junk that he would find just like at work or wherever, and he was always building devices like torture devices and different things. So with the FBI showing up, David went and he said for her not to worry about it and that he would just take care of it. And they talked to him, but I guess he got himself out of it because nothing really happened the first time the FBI came. So Cindy says that she has no idea how the FBI found out about any of it, but then whenever the police were talking to Jessie told them, remember, this is David's daughter, she was a drug dealer and she lived with her mother most of her life, and she didn't participate in anything that was going on in the trailer. And one day she felt bad about it and she left an anonymous tip to the FBI saying that he might be selling women in the slave trade or sex trade, whatever you want to call it. And so that is why the FBI showed up at their house. Jessie did end up being arrested and charged with kidnapping, criminal sexual penetration, criminal sexual contact, and conspiracy. And she was just in jail for 2.5 years, and then she was released and she was on probation for 1 year. Jumping back to Cindy, she also told the police that David had tried to get rid of the bodies in different ways. He tried to dump a body in the lake, but it kept coming back up because, you know, if you go in water, your dead body, you release gases and you're gonna float back up to the top. I feel like most people know that. And so he started like cutting the stomachs open and then trying to submerge them. He's like, if water gets inside, then it'll fully submerge. But then it still didn't work quite as well as he thought it would. So he started opening their stomachs and filling them with rocks, and then he would dump them in the lake after like tying them up. Cindy told them that at least 7 of the girls were dumped in the lake. Cindy was charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, accessory to kidnapping, accessory to criminal penetration, and she was sentenced to 36 years in prison, but she only ended up serving 19. She was up for release in 2017, but after that there's really no information about where she is. So maybe she's out there wandering around. We don't know. So through David's whole trial, he kept denying everything. He felt absolutely no remorse. He absolutely did not care about the women. He said that everything was consensual and that he was the victim because these women are all making this stuff up about him. He was really trying to make everyone feel sorry for him, but it was not working at all. They could only charge him for the 3 cases of the 3 women that had survived. They couldn't charge him for the others because they never found bodies or proof or anything. I mean, they had the proof of his journals, but like, and pictures and stuff, but that's not gonna like hold up in court, I guess. I'm not really sure how all of that happened, but he did have to go to court 3 different times for each of the women that did survive, which was Kelly, Angelica, and Cynthia. But unfortunately, he never went to court for Angelica because she passed away and OD'd from drugs, which is really sad. She never like got her justice. Hopefully she's in a better place now. Because the FBI had such a strong case against him, they went ahead and tried to convict him, even though like all that they had were these 3 women who had allegations against him. But he was still sentenced to 224 years in prison after getting a plea deal. With the plea deal, he had 224 years in prison, and he exchanged that for his daughter Jessie getting a lesser sentence, and it worked because, like I said, she was only there for like 2.5 years. David finally agreed to show the police everywhere he had put the bodies. I am so frustrated with the police because they said that draining the lake would be just too expensive, so they couldn't actually drain it, and they said that the lake was too deep and too dark and it would be too hard for them to find anything. They didn't have like scuba divers or anything looking for anyone. Like, it was just a mess. The police would not search the lake for the bodies, and it really makes me mad, but whatever, because they think that there's at least 7 bodies in there. And they finally got David to agree to show them where all of the bodies are, but before they got a chance for him to show them, he died of a heart attack on May 28th of 2002 at the age of 62. So that was really convenient for him and really annoying for the rest of us. In November of that same year, just a few months after he died, the police ended up opening the toy box up to the public, and they said that it was for victims to come and look and see if it jogged any memories, like what happened in Kelly's case. But that's not what happened at all. It became a tourist attraction, and I think, I don't know, like a lot of girls were tortured and killed, and it just shouldn't be a tourist attraction. I know that their intentions are to have more victims come forward, but like, they suspected that he had killed 1 person at least per year since he was 14 years old. So at the end of the day, they believe that he had over 60 victims. And the police actually searched McRae Canyon in 2011 as like a last effort to find bodies, and this canyon was near the lake in Elephant Butte, but they didn't really find anything. So that is the toy box murders. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Maybe you need to go listen to some happy music, get away, escape, because that story is completely insane. Maybe you need to go and eat some Halloween candy, get your mind off of this case. There was some like use of animals that David did. He would use animals on the girls and stuff, but I didn't really want to get into any of that, so I'm just quickly mentioning it at the end because there were a lot more details that I didn't want to fully go into, like some of the tools and things that he made. I don't really want to describe those or go into all of that. That information is out there if you are curious. Like, it makes me hurt to think about those things and what these women went through and all of this stuff. This whole thing just grosses me out. I really hope that these women were able to move on and they were able to have long fulfilling lives, or they're still having long fulfilling lives, because this wasn't like forever ago or anything. What do you think about David Ray Parker, the toy box killer? And what do you think about Cindy? And what do you think about his daughter Jessie? What do you think about all of these people? Let me know down below. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up because I like it when you like it, and also hit the button down below, subscribe, become a part of the family. We're a bunch of people who like to look really pretty and talk about things that can get really ugly. So if you are into that, then definitely stick around. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias. It is just Shellie G MUA on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you want to see my makeup without having to hear me talk, then I highly suggest you go there to do that. I hope that you are having an amazing spooky season, and I will see you tomorrow. God bless. Love you. Bye.